go ahead and pass things over to our moderator, Chris Molineaux, who's the president and CEO of Life Sciences Pennsylvania.
Terrific. Well, thank you, and thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Special thanks to Angela and our friend Tracy Brela, and of course Tiffany and the whole Science Center team for hosting this forum this afternoon. We've got three terrific panelists representing different types of companies, different size companies in different stages of development. So I'm going to ask, going left to right, I think it's a little small on the screen, but it looks like David, then Tyiwanna, then Christian. Then Christian to introduce their organizations. As Angela said, their bios will be in the chat room, so we won't go into the personal bios. But why don't we start with the company introductions? David, you want to start us off?
Yeah, happy to. Can everyone hear me? Good. I think I got a yes from Chris.
Yes.
David West, co-founder and CEO of Proscia. We are a software company that sells technology to the pathology lab. So this company is a product of work that I was doing at Johns Hopkins going back 8 years ago, and became my full-time job about 5 years ago. We've raised about 35 million to date, about 70 employees, half of whom, maybe a little bit less than half, are in Philadelphia and growing quickly. So we're hiring. If anyone is looking for a job or knows someone who has a job. What do we do? Let's say you get a biopsy from a dermatologist, or maybe a colon biopsy or something like that. A physical piece of tissue gets sent down into a lab, maybe in the basement of a hospital or somewhere like LabCorp, 100 miles away. And it's going to be put on a glass slide and reviewed by a pathologist, medical doctor who's trained to look at that tissue using a microscope and understand the patterns of diseases like cancer, to say, what's going on here? Is this cancer? How bad is it? And what might our treatment options be? Pathology has been done this way for the past 150 years. It is a deeply 20th century discipline, if you will, or maybe even 19th century discipline, and has struggled to adapt to the digital world. And that's what we're all about. These labs are adopting scanners that generate huge images of these biopsies, something like 1 billion pixels per image or a gigabyte per image. And we build software that helps labs, first and foremost, manage their data and their workflows in a digital world. From the second that image is created to the sign out of that case, like report and render in a diagnosis, to image analysis and AI applications that can help automate workflows and say something new that we otherwise wouldn't be able to say with the human eye alone. So I'll stop there. I'm sure we'll talk more about what we do in the context of Philly throughout the presentation.
Well, maybe real quickly, just David, is your product on the market yet?
Yeah.
So how broadly, just for a little more context?
So we sell into life sciences organizations and academic centers and diagnostic laboratories. We're used by dozens of these labs globally. We have about 5,000 pathologists and scientists using our platform. Our customers are everywhere from Bristol Myers Squibb, AbbVie, Amgen, Johns Hopkins, University of Pennsylvania, major diagnostic reference labs in Europe and the US.
Terrific, thanks. T, your company is a little bit earlier. You want to describe your company?
Yes, I'm wondering how I got on this panel. Hi. Yes. Yes. Hi, I'm Tyiwanna. I prefer T. And I am the founder and creator of the OrVac. The name of my company is Eusemann Products. It's a product development company. And the first product that we're developing is the OrVac. And the OrVac is a handheld portable oral aspirator. It was originally created for my mother as a dysphagia victim after a stroke, to self-suction oral saliva at her will, not having to wait for a nurse or someone to come in and do it. The most common solution for oral drooling, for drooling, is a bib. And so I knew it had to be a better solution for that. And I am with the help of the Launch Lane Accelerator Program, now I'm at the beta prospect. And actually, last year in a pandemic, I raised $115,000. So as a first-time medical startup, that's my kind of kudos.
That's awesome to do in the middle of a pandemic, entirely remotely.
And it's grant money.
Yeah, all right.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
We love non-dilutive funding.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you and welcome. And Christian.
Yeah, I'm the other end of the spectrum. So I work for Siemens Healthineers. We are a kind of a startup. We spun out of Siemens 2.5 years ago or 3 years ago. So we are now publicly traded as an independent company, but we have 60,000 employees. So we're not your usual startup company. What we do is medical imaging, so a lot of medical devices, but then also interventional systems, lab diagnostics, point of care. And just 2 months ago, we acquired Varian. It was a $16 billion acquisition. Varian is the worldwide leader in radiation therapy. And we also have acquired a number of other companies since we went independent, since we spun out from Siemens AG. A lot of them on the software end, but also on the remote robotics spectrum. So we believe that down the line, healthcare will shift and we will do not only home visits, but really that doctors can do remote treatments, like a pen doctor could treat somebody 100 miles from here for a stroke. So this is the area we are really focused on investing in. And yeah, we have a very broad portfolio.
Terrific. Well, thank you all for that introduction. So I want to, the purpose of this panel discussion obviously is to discuss why Philly, why now? And I think that's really, although it's the name of this panel, I think it's sort of the purpose of the entire Venture Cafe afternoon and evening this evening. So I want to throw some statistics out just to set some context, and then ask the three of you to respond to it. You don't need to memorize these numbers. But a couple of things. So first, according to Techonomy, there are more than 180 MedTech establishments in the greater Philadelphia metropolitan area, employing 6,500 individuals in medical devices and equipment. There are 45,000 individuals employed in the life sciences broadly in greater Philadelphia. 38 four-year colleges offering programs related to life sciences, including 13,000 STEM degrees granted by regional institutions between 2016 and 2017. So a lot of good stats about the neighborhood that we all live and work in from a life sciences standpoint and a med tech standpoint. So let me just start maybe with you, T. With those statistics in mind, what do these numbers mean for you as you grow your company? And were there any unique factors that contributed to you and your company being based in the Philadelphia region?
Well, thank you. As a resident of Philadelphia and a proud Philadelphian, I already knew the potential of Philly in the universities and coming from, not even with those stats, but I knew building a medical device company, Philadelphia would be my best answer. There's all the universities around, Temple, obviously University City. We have the best hospitals and a lot of we have access to a lot of other resources. And so as far as Philadelphia, like I said, I knew the potential of Philadelphia by living here. So I always wanted to be a part of this University City area. I knew once I had a prototype to show to someone, it was just a matter of going around and asking for the help. And also I believe that I can manufacture in the state of Pennsylvania as well. I know a lot of people keep telling me to go to China, go to Mexico, go to Canada, but it's a plastic injection molding. We can do that in Pennsylvania. We have the potential.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would also say go to Minnesota. Minneapolis, obviously a hotbed for med tech. But David, your technology, I think I understood correctly, out of Johns Hopkins. What brought you into Philadelphia, and anything you see that's unique here that you can benefit from?
Yeah, so we moved here. We didn't start here. We started in Baltimore, and we decided to come to Philadelphia. Philadelphia has an amazing technology and healthcare scene. It is in right in the corridor that we want to be in, between where our origins were in Baltimore, easy access, an hour and some change train ride to New York, where a lot of our capital came from, an hour and some change flight to Boston. And there's like, we have a couple employees in Boston and they're on that American Airlines shuttle that leaves like every hour. It's very accessible to the entire East Coast. And um, and it was access to great talent. Chris, you hit on a lot of those points. Um, Great universities, great healthcare systems, etc. So that's our story, and now we're growing in a world that I think is really setting up Philadelphia for success. The future is decentralized. We heard from Christian, right? Like a doctor can be maybe treating a stroke patient hundreds of miles away. um, you look at what we're doing in pathology. Someone could be reading, a pathologist in Philadelphia at Penn could be reading a case for a patient in Nebraska if they're the best subspecialized pathologist for that case. And I'm just talking about kind of the customers that I sell into, but the way that I attract talent um, is where our hub is in Philadelphia here, but we're able to, bring employees in from all over the world, hire people all over the world, but with a center of gravity here.
Terrific. And Christian, I think we all recognize your South Philly accent.
Yes.
But for a large, well-established global company, even as a spinoff, but obviously Siemens and now Siemens Healthineers with the size of your organization. Just talk a little bit about what keeps you here and what's attractive about this region.
I think there's a lot attractive about the region. If you look at who we recruit, usually it's life science and STEM people. You mentioned these amazing stats. So this is really a city with universities we are working with. We have a lot of our key opinion leaders in this country sit in Philly, pediatric medicine, also adult medicine. So we partner with a lot of the folks there, but there are a number of other positives, like David mentioned proximity to the cities. So personally, I'm a lot in Washington, D.C., meeting with the FDA, with other folks. It's really convenient. And then you mentioned Minnesota. I live there. It's way too cold. So don't go there. But then I also lived in Boston before. And I like the area here better because the balance is there. You have the science, you have the people, but you also have a cost of living that is actually affordable. We left Boston when we decided we want a second child. This is not a joke, but it was so expensive to live up there. We left. And here, I think you can really build something. So
It's also
big
cold in
fan.
Boston too.
It's
So
also called exactly. That's exactly right. And actually, I just want to highlight something that both David and Christian alluded to. David talked about the proximity to New York and the capital markets, and Christian, obviously, the proximity to Washington and the FDA. Philadelphia sits almost equidistant between those two very important hubs. So I agree, it's a great place geographically as well. Just maybe a sort of a quick sidebar, Christian, if you would. As a scientific collaboration manager for Siemens Healthineers, what are you looking for with regard to partnerships with companies like David's or T's or others in the startup community in Philadelphia?
So what we do a lot, actually, we talk to our customers, our clients, which are medical providers, about pain points, like what is still unsolved. So this is really what we use as a strategy when we look for companies. And as I mentioned before, who we work with a lot is the folks in Philly. So Philly is really one of our main hubs around the world for collaboration. So we often, when we look at companies, we hear about them from our customers. If a neurosurgeon tells me, hey, you have to look at this new device, I will look at it. I get, I would say, at least 100 notifications a day on LinkedIn with somebody that tries to sell me something. I ignore them and I apologize if any of you sent me something, but it's just too many. So we look for people that can tell us there is merit. If a VC tells me it's an interesting company, a VC that I work with, or if I have here the Science Center. If the Science Center comes to me and says like, there is something, I will look at it. So I think there's a lot in Philly. There's a lot around Philly, not only on the pharma end, also on the med device end, as you mentioned. So for us, it's good in partnering because we learn early about what companies are in town and what opportunities exist.
Terrific. And then I'm going to ask this question of all three of you, but sticking with Christian for a second. How do you see the different industries and different sectors in Philadelphia intersecting with each other to form new and interesting interdisciplinary ventures?
Good question. So what we have seen a trend in recent years is Siemens. Years ago, I talked very product specific. So if somebody wanted to buy an MRI scanner, that's what we discussed. Now we often meet and we talk about they're building a new hospital. They need communication aspects, security aspects. We are talking about 100 things that are part of a bundle of a 10-year partnership. And then the fact what David and I alluded to with remote health. So here in town, we just discussed Comcast. Comcast sits here. There will be a role in regards to communication to go out there. But the time when the hospital really just purchased based on a siloed decision seems to be over. People are looking more in an overall bundle. How does every little aspect fit into my clinical care pathway or in my setup? So if we can really collaborate and help people actually see what is a great approach to reduce these pain points that I alluded to earlier, I think that's what we can do. And there are a lot of companies here we collaborate with, and I'm sure there are many, many more that we should be collaborating with to really provide a better offering to our customers.
Yeah, so T, I don't know if at the stage of your company you've been able to lift your head out of the swirl yet in the startup mode, but have you thought about the different interdisciplinary or the different available functions and competencies that exist in Philadelphia and how that might help you?
Yes. Well, number one, I mean, maybe it's a little naive, but I really believe that I can build my company everything, including funding, manufacture, everything. And it's a pride fact for me for it to be said, made and built in Pennsylvania. I'm a Philadelphian, so it's something that I'm seriously looking at. I've had offers. I had to turn down Mike Sinai because I'm not going out to California for potential. I know it sounds cocky, but I really believe in Philadelphia and all its potential. Um, with the colleges and the college students, I mean, we have the potential of my next CEO is somewhere looking, maybe even looking at this video. I don't have to go um, out of the state necessarily to find potential. I just recently finished customer analysis from the University of Pennsylvania. I didn't know that exists, where you could get bio student, graduate doctorates and doctoral students and grad students to go and do research for you. That was something that cut 3 years off of work for me in my product. So the brain power is here. And now I have a hardware company, which was very difficult to get started. I created the OrVac 14 years ago. I just didn't have the resources or the resources to put it together. And now I do. I have manufacturers that are in upper state Pennsylvania saying, hey, I can do this. So the potential for me as a startup, I'm still putting everything together, but being a part of the Launch Lane Accelerator program, I have advisors and things that can help me. So for all the startups, the actual just beginning and you don't know where to start, just open up we'll go to Google and Google Accelerator programs and just ask for the help. If you ask for the help, somebody will reach out and help you.
So T, could you just, I'm sorry, Dave, just T, could you talk, maybe just expand a little bit on some of the sources of the postdocs and the fellows and those that.
It's called the Penn Biotech Group, the Penn Biotech Group, and the students. And all they want is a reference, well, it's a little cash, but very little. And they send their squad of students out, and they went out and spoke to um, ear, nose, and throat doctors. My product is directly dealing with ear, nose, and throat. It helps you drain the excess saliva from your mouth. So ear, nose, and throat doctors, physical therapists. I now, because of that program, I have 27 doctors that have reached out to me that are ready to test my product once I have I know, isn't that amazing?
That's tremendous.
Once I have a prototype, and that potential there. And also they lend me their bios so I can now put that on my website, as they are doctors that, want to be a part of the OrVac. And I don't think I could have went to another city and did that. Maybe I could, but it's right here in my backyard.
Yeah, and of course, I think everybody's familiar with the co-op program at Drexel, and there are others around the region, but Drexel, I think, is probably the most well recognized, and many companies in the life sciences utilize Drexel co-op students for work in labs and in technology. I'm sorry, David, I interrupted you.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, you were kind of highlighting one of the things I thought was so interesting about what you said, T. Is like, you know, you talked about kind of the intersection of talent and academia converging towards to helping your business, doing great science or market research or whatever that is. I think academic partnerships are totally critical to any company like ours, and we have Jefferson as a partner. We do a lot of studies with them. I think 4 with them. University of Pennsylvania. We're in a very data intensive industry as well. So a lot of the data that's coming from these organizations is fueling the types of science that we're able to do and the types of products that we're able to build. I also just want to touch on something that Christian said on the topic of kind of an increasingly integrated healthcare ecosystem. I think that's a trend that's been sort of a tectonic shift in healthcare as we move from, say, we move towards value-based care. We're going to see more integration throughout the healthcare ecosystem. That's how you unlock efficiencies, and being able to form the types of partnerships that allow a company to do that is very valuable. From a product standpoint, from a data standpoint, I think data in healthcare is increasingly integrated, and we can get much better, healthcare system in the United States and globally. But it starts with these types of partnerships.
Yeah, just thinking about some of the healthcare legislation and efforts over the last 2 decades, where as an industry and academia, the provider community, the commercial insurers, we're all now kind of in this stew together. Do you see that fostering more partnerships and more of that collaboration? Because it almost seems like we can't possibly have enough in order to be efficient and to deliver value.
We're in the golden age of healthcare. I think the next decade is going to be profound. The spotlight was put on healthcare over the past 18 months in a very, very meaningful way. I think about my industry in digital pathology. We're kind of in this convergence of attention on lab diagnostics. How many people got a COVID test over the past 18 months? Everybody, multiple COVID tests. That's all coming out of the lab. Talking about telemedicine and remote health, remote medicine. Looking at drug development, how we bring drugs to market, vaccines to market, setting records. I think that really inspired people to put more capital into the space, to maybe dedicate their lives or their careers to that. So it has me very bullish on the next 10 years, and I want to be doing it here.
No, that's great. And I do want to come back to 2020 in particular, and the last 15, 16 months in particular. But you mentioned capital, and we were talking a little bit about human resources, but let's talk about financial resources. So, and starting, maybe I'll start with you, T. What do you think the state of capital availability is for MedTech generally and Philadelphia specifically? Recognizing that money is portable, there aren't a lot of VC firms with shingles hanging out down Market Street, but money is portable. But what do you think the environment's like for MedTech capital generally?
Well, I can talk for the hardware. It was difficult. A lot of people didn't want to touch a hardware company because the inventory and the potential of loss if it goes under. It's unlike a SaaS business, like a software as a service, where you can pack up and you can sell your servers and get out quickly. So, but that has changed. I don't know whether it was the pandemic that made people say, "Oh, I don't have to touch it." You don't have to actually make something before you can. You don't have to actually make it in the real world as far as having it and handling it virtually before actually putting out a lot of money to do it. So I think people are a lot less afraid to invest in a hardware company like they used to be. Like I said, it was 14 years. I couldn't find someone that would give me money to actually try to make my product. And so whether it was the pandemic or the accelerator programs and exposure, now I'm having to literally turn people down for money because it's just too much for me right now. You have to be careful on whose money you take too. So
Money can be expensive. David?
yes.
So turn off my mic there. So we, like T, raised money in the middle of a pandemic. Very weird experience, and actually was fairly successful. And we're able to bring in capital from a lead investor in the Bay Area, Scale Venture Partners, able to bring in capital from strategic investors and other funds, also throughout our seed Series A and Series B. So that's been fueling our growth, fueling our business alongside of it, organic growth. I mentioned New York City, for example, close by, and about half of our investor base is from New York City. But our biggest investor in our seed rounds, our seed lead was in New York, but our biggest investor for our seed round is Robinhood Ventures, which is an angel group here in Philadelphia. They made a big bet on our company, and have, I was going to say doubled down, but they've taken their pro rata and then some every round since. They've been an amazing, anchor Philadelphia investor for us.
Terrific. And Christian, I know it's very different for an organization like Siemens Healthineers, but how have the public markets been to your company?
Public market has actually been very, very good to us. So our stock grew significantly during the COVID time. What was good for me, and I was really proud to be with Siemens, because we were one of the companies in the field that didn't lay anybody off. So we really focused on maintaining the workforce, and where we have seen an uptick, of course, is it put much more spotlight on our diagnostics division.
Yeah.
So we were always known for the medical imaging environment, and the central lab and point of care was always like an afterthought. It felt like by many people, but it's a very important business, and COVID changed it to some extent. So a lot more government funding in regards to grants from the NIH to help with COVID development. And we are now one of the biggest producers of rapid COVID tests globally. So things has changed, and the market has seen that. The market has seen strong performance on the imaging side, but then really that growth in the diagnostics field as well. So it was very positive.
Sure.
What if I jump off with a question about that? Was Siemens able to attract talent during the COVID-19? There were a lot of companies that laid people off, and there was a point over the last 18 months where maybe we're not seeing this as much right now, but there was sort of a surplus in the supply of talent. Was that something that was at all a strategic initiative, or even just to maintain and not lay people off was unique during that time period?
So I think we added a couple net new people.
Yeah.
Of course, in a company with that many folks, you have a lot of retirement.
Right.
And we had a lot of people that actually left because of COVID.
Yeah.
It changed their perspective in life. It's like, I don't want to travel
Yeah.
4 days a week. I want to spend time at home with the family. So we had a number of departures, but we then could actually, it was a good time to attract talent. So it was actually, in that regard, I think folks started looking at us that usually wouldn't look. Like in
Yeah.
my field, I often compete with the Googles of this
Right.
world to hire people.
Yeah.
And people are lured in by the large sign-on package that lasts 2 years, and then after a year and a half, they realize they have to find a different company because they cannot afford to live in the Bay Area without that stock package. So it was good for us.
Yeah.
And so, Christian, just stick with that for a second. What about the ability for a large company, a potential strategic partner like Siemens Healthineers, to look for partners? How did the pandemic affect that, if at all?
So we looked at different partners. So we started to look more at home health. We partnered up with oh my gosh, what's the term? With a ventilator company, things we never looked at before that we then brought to the market. So I think we shifted our focus somewhat, and talking to leadership in hospitals around the country, COVID shifted their focus too. So they don't believe that everybody will still come into the main hospital building. They believe a lot of patients like the convenience of doing something closer to home. And we have to adapt to that as well. So it definitely had an impact what company we look at, who we invest in, how we conduct business.
Would it be fair to say that it actually, in an ironic way, really expanded your portfolio of products and services? Not, I mean, for the company, for products and services. And if so, is that going to be a long-term proposition that you're going to stick with?
Yes, I would say so. So, and just to be clear, we, of course, the market went down significantly in like the imaging equipment, because even if you bought it, often we couldn't even install the equipment that was already purchased because people were not let in the hospitals pre-vaccines. So there was a lot of impact, but it shifted our focus, and it shifted the focus of the healthcare providers. So definitely there were a lot of things that go far beyond us having now a Teams meeting or Zoom, whatever we're on. There's so much more. Healthcare is changed through COVID. As unfortunate as COVID was, this is something that will have a lasting impact that will be positive.
And David, you made that point very clearly, I should say. So maybe talk about how the pandemic affected your business, your access to customers and testing and so forth.
Yeah. So we are in a very unique kind of business as it relates to what COVID did over the past 18 months, in that we've been, far before COVID happened, making the case that pathologists should not be tied to their microscope, these physical 150-year-old devices. March 2020 came around and hospitals started shutting down, right? We're not going to let people in. We're not going to let vendors in, right? Et cetera, et cetera. Pathologists couldn't come into the office. They were letting 1 or 2 pathologists in, very strict social distancing rules, and their ability to take on new cases went down. I think one pathologist put it really well in a tweet, and I wish I remember her name so I could give her credit. She said something along the lines of, "We failed to prepare for peacetime digital pathology, and now we have to prepare for wartime digital pathology." How could they separate the brick and mortar elements of their laboratory from what could be, in the lab world, we would call this the professional component rather than the technical component? The professional component is this kind of, what's happening with their professional expertise, knowledge work, if you will. How can we take the knowledge work and divorce that from what happens in the actual laboratory itself? So we were able to bring on a lot of new customers. We 10x'd our revenue over that time period. We brought on some incredible new logos. Um, and I think we're kind of just getting started, because what it really did for our market is it changed the fabric and the culture of our field. Pathology, like much of medicine, is has a deep reverence for the standard of care, and that's a good thing. Um, but that comes with not disrupting, or an allergic reaction to disruption. And I think many folks in the pathology space looked at this like that one pathologist who said this tweet and said, "Never again. Let's never let this happen again." And so they're saying, well, I do need to get a vendor into my laboratory and install a physical scanner, which can be my bridge from the physical world to the digital world. And now they're allowing people to come back in and saying, well, let's prepare, let's get ready, so that we can be part of what will probably be an increasingly decentralized world and healthcare landscape.
Excellent. And T, unprecedented times as you're trying to continue to grow your company. Any lessons learned? Just tell us what 2020 brought to you.
Well, in the beginning of 2020, I was selected to be a part of the Launch Lane Accelerator program. But oh wow, I'm finally going to be in University City and get to be a part of the whole thing. And then COVID hit. Well, luckily we were able to pivot, and we still had our weekly meetings, and kind of our cohort grew closer. And that is 7 other teams of potential of relationships are spread out. I personally think that medicine will never go back the way like David and Kristen said, will never go back the same. It's just too convenient in order to when you're dealing with taking care of, and I take care of my father and my mother. So not to have to drag them out of the house to go to a doctor's appointment, and I can just set up a Zoom call and for those appointments, and he'll have a nurse come in and take his blood work, and all the things can be done remotely. I definitely don't think it's going to go back to having to drag my parents in through wheelchairs and things. But for me, as my business, I strived during the pandemic. I mean, I lost people as far as the pandemic, and I'm really sorry about that. But being able to virtually contact someone and give them the pitch over a 15-minute Zoom call versus me flying to California and to do that, and all the expenses, I saved money with my company that I didn't have to put into a convention and go and kind of have a booth. So all of this is virtual. So the pandemic, that was great. Not, I hate saying great anywhere dealing with the pandemic, but as a startup business owner, not having the funding to go out and beg for money and plead and do all the things that you had to do before the pandemic, just to call them up, get on the phone, and it's a Zoom call away. Like I
Yeah,
said,
those are great points, T. And let me go back to Dave for a second. You talked about the business impact and what you had, how you had to adjust, and things you had to adopt. But as a leader of an organization, what are some of the less tangible but equally important things that you need to consider as a leader of people in the
Yeah, we had a really, I talked about some of the other things that happened over the last year. It was weird in that in March 2020, we were 30 employees. Now we're 70 employees, and on track to grow to 90 or 100 over the next couple of months here, fueled by Series B capital, which we brought on in November of 2020. So two things trying to balance here. One is it's very hard to scale and grow a company. My job becomes different as CEO. And that is the case for anyone who's going through that sort of growth stage trajectory. But we're also doing that in an entirely remote environment, which is unique. So we had to figure out, how do we sort of rewire our business to accommodate remote work? And how do we actually get the best of that situation? So now we're starting, we had half of our team into the office this week, or at least the majority of our US team. That was awesome. And I think it reminded me what we can get as an organization when we can be in person. And there was a lot to gain from a remote work setting. I think as the world kind of returns, how do we figure out the best of both worlds? We don't want to just throw the baby out with the bathwater, because there's something about creativity that comes from being in person. I think we lost that. I think we incurred a little bit of creative debt. And you heard a lot about productivity. Okay, we're more productive, or we're just as productive in remote work. But I think if you look at, say, many companies, take Apple, for example, a company that prides itself on a creative culture. I think many companies like that view more than just productivity as being integral to the success of the company. So that's one thing that we've kind of had to work through. That has been a challenge. And if you don't mind me commandeering this for one more minute, I just want to touch, jump off on something that you reminded me of on the topic of capital raising. We didn't have to go to conferences, et cetera. We did it entirely remotely. When we were early stage, everyone would say, why are you in Philadelphia? Why? Nobody asked us that question on Series B. Nobody asked us that. It is, and I think that's permanent. I don't think it will be a question anymore. I think people will say, Philadelphia, great.
And that's excellent. So we do have a question from the audience that actually relates to the comments you were just making, David and T. Here's the question. So the last 15, I should just remind the audience, if you have questions, go ahead and submit them through the chat function. So here's the question. The last 15 to 18 months, there appears to be a greater focus on machine learning and AI, artificial intelligence. How will machine learning help your organization organically grow, if it will? And how do you think it will contribute to better outcomes in your respective businesses? And maybe I'll start with Christian. So how will AI help and machine learning help your organization grow? And do you think it will contribute to better outcomes in your business?
Yes, whoever asked the question, thank you. It feels like it's planted for me, so I appreciate it. No, so we are, so Siemens, what a lot of people don't know, we are in the healthcare sector, we are the second largest AI company worldwide. Only Google holds more patents than Siemens. It's a major focus of ours. And if you look especially our medical imaging scanners over the last couple of years, they have changed significantly. More automation, taking more and more away from the technologist. They are still the technologists there, but we really want to guide things to bring as much consistency into the acquisitions as possible. But I would say the pandemic really has changed that focus on AI even more. On truly day one in foreign countries, what we had seen is everybody was putting these patients into CT scanners. Not that much in the US, but there were still millions of people getting scanned all of a sudden. And it took us, I believe, less than 3 months. And we had an AI solution that actually detected scarring from COVID and detected disease, and you could track these patients over time. And we worked then on algorithms that actually show should the patient be hospitalized or not. These were turnaround times we couldn't have envisioned before. Like, we tried to be quick with development, but then we are a large company, and so we are intrinsically slow, I think. But this really showed what can be done. And so it shifted the focus on AI, further, I would say. So the question is spot on.
Yeah. I am happy to jump off that one too. We build AI applications as kind of a core part of our business, and we're what's happening in our space is there's a new kind of data that's being created that otherwise, billion pixels in every single one of these images, and very high signal information that's telling a story about a patient's disease, like cancer or whatever it might be. Otherwise, it would be sitting on glass, collecting dust, doing nothing for us. I think that's the case throughout all of healthcare. You're seeing a lot of data being created. Another version of this question that I hear is like, oh, is this going to replace doctors? The reality is that there's so much data being created. What we want to be able to do is use machines to make this intelligible. That's what AI is all about. AI machine learning thrives. They're on a lot of data. It's a very data intensive type of technology, and it can make sense of a lot of data. for humans who are good at other types of things, like high dimensional problems. And that's what I think you're seeing throughout all of healthcare, and will and is a real thing. It's a real trend. It goes through waves of hype, um, but there's a real need for this in the current healthcare paradigm.
Yeah, and
Right,
with
sure.
in the right blend, I guess, along with the human element, which actually brings me to my next question, which is about clinical trials. And can you talk, maybe David and Christian, talk about MedTech clinical trials, and obviously talking about class 2 and class 3 devices. How is the Philadelphia region? How would you rate the Philadelphia region as a place for clinical trial work?
So we have one foot in the life sciences world and one foot in the sort of clinical diagnostics world, and so very much see this. And actually, I will say, broadly speaking, in healthcare, we're seeing those collide. The world of treatment and the world of diagnostics are getting closer, um, and it's a trend that's powered by data. It's a trend that's powered by the shift to value-based care. When you look at the Philadelphia region, New Jersey, central New Jersey, and virtually, I should say, many major biopharma companies have major R&D facilities there. Um, Many of our customers are we meet with them in person, a car drive away. You look at 2 blocks away from here, we're seeing new life sciences companies bringing new drugs to market that are popping up. What's the name? What am I thinking? Spark Therapeutic that was
Or
acquired
therapeutic, sure.
by,
That's certainly the most well known,
yeah,
acquired by Roche. Yeah, in 2019.
Roche, right? Um, so and then I'll also add that, just as it relates to, we talked about this before, but proximity to uh, Washington D.C. I was on a panel with former um, FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb earlier this week, and unfortunately, we had to dial in, but we were like, hey, maybe we go down to DC and I'll meet in person. So I think as companies are thinking about their regulatory strategies, and the sort of clinical scientific efforts to bring, drugs and medical devices to market, it's a great place to be.
And are you thinking, and I don't want to go too far down into your business, but are you thinking about a companion therapeutic and diagnostic approach with your diagnostic, with
Well, yeah, what I
partnering
mean by,
opportunities?
part of what I'm thinking about when I'm talking about the world of treatment and the world of just diagnostics getting closer, companion diagnostics are exactly what I'm talking about. And it's very relevant to to digital pathology, where the tissue is relevant biomarkers for directing treatment.
Yeah. And T, do you see, just going back to the question of machine learning and AI, do you see an application for your company and as you develop your product?
Yeah, there's actually the second iteration of the product has a lot. I can't talk about it now, but because of COVID and all of the digital learning, we've added that as a diagnostic. And so, yes, I do.
Terrific. So let me switch gears, just sort of a slightly different direction, but about advocacy and public policy. So obviously, I think you're all aware that the Science Center, University City Science Center, and the organization I lead, Life Sciences Pennsylvania, are actively engaged in public policy advocacy, both at the state level and at the federal level. And I would say we share the mission of making Pennsylvania, or at the very least Philadelphia, the most attractive place to open and operate a life sciences company. So, as we go out to Harrisburg, and Saul Bihar and the team at the Science Center and others go out to Harrisburg, what message would you like us to carry to legislators and other policymakers in the state capitol and in Washington D.C. for that matter?
Yeah.
And maybe I'll start with T.
More resources, whatever you do. Just, I think that a lot of, I can only talk to mine. I'm nowhere near the size of these two gentlemen, but I'm
Or their
more
company.
resources. Right. I'm really right starting. Like we just got our first beta. So, but more resources in urban neighborhoods. Yeah, University Science Center. This used to be called the Bottom. 40 years ago, you couldn't walk down here. So more resources in urban neighborhoods would be potential. Like I live in North Philly, and now I run a medical device that's potentially $50 million. Potentially. So more resources in urban areas is what I would be shouting from the rooftops.
Terrific. David?
Yeah. So, I'm not a policy expert. I'm not a tax expert, but I'll bring up an anecdote here, and maybe this is more relevant to Philadelphia specifically, but perhaps to Pennsylvania in broadly. We have a number of employees in Philadelphia, in the Philadelphia proper, that is, that were maybe in like the Manayunk area, said, I'll just jump 2 minutes north to Conshohocken and live there because I don't want to pay the city wage tax. And now that we're in a hybrid or remote work environment, I can come to the city one time a week or a few times a month and still be where my family is, et cetera, and be part of this great company, but not pay the city wage tax. That's going to be a problem the city has to deal with. I think that's going to be the case. You look at, I don't know if this is true. I'm going to totally speak out of my element here, but apparently there was plans to be a third Comcast tower, and maybe those are on pause right now because we don't know what this hybrid work environment is going to be like. At 3.5% or 3.7% or something like that every year, it's a non-negligible amount of money. And I get it when employees say, I don't know if I want to do that. I don't know if I want to come in. I would come in maybe 3 days a week, 4 days a week, or whatever that is, because I live so close in Conshohocken or wherever. But I'm not so sure because I don't want to pay that city wage tax. And then I think more broadly, I bring up that one particular tax because I have an anecdote to share about it. But naturally, anything that's favorable tax policy is going to be great for businesses and innovation. And attracting talent So
Yeah.
mine goes to
Yeah,
that.
and it's sort of piling on what's already a very challenging corporate net income tax, which is statewide. Pennsylvania actually has the second highest corporate net income tax in the country, second to Iowa, of all places. So,
why is Miami blowing up? I was down in Miami a few weeks ago. Everyone in tech is going to. A lot of venture capitalists are moving from Silicon Valley to Miami. Let's get them to move from Silicon Valley to Philadelphia. Well, they're moving there because there's like no income tax or something like that.
Right.
So, I don't know if Pennsylvania will get there, but it does show that there's the implications are pretty significant to growing an innovation ecosystem.
Absolutely. Christian, anything to add on the policy environment?
Maybe on the positive side, for example, we are out in Chester County, and we have Chrissy Houlihan, who is phenomenally supportive for business growth and so on. So even our Republican colleagues love her as a Democrat. So it's really, she does a tremendous job. And I lived in Boston when Cambridge was exploding with biotech companies coming in, and I really think if the incentives are right, people will come. People back then talked about there's that great academic environment. We have the same thing here, great academic environment. So I believe that if the state puts focus on this, I believe there is a way to have the same growth trajectory as other areas have seen. Because as I mentioned earlier, Boston too expensive. Palo Alto area, that's impossible to go there. We are leaving these areas. Philly still has the right mix, and I think if the state plays it right, there could be a huge opportunity here.
Yeah. Well, our time is just about up, but I did not ask the panelists to think about this last question, but if you could summarize, what you envision for the future of MedTech in Philadelphia in one sentence, what would you say? And I'm going to put you on the spot, David. You go first.
Yeah, this is really an on-the-spot question. Okay, so one sentence: the future of MedTech innovation in Philadelphia. I think, Philadelphia can be a place where capital and talent come together in a world where the final frontier of innovation of the early 20th century is healthcare.
Excellent. Excellent. T?
Mm. That is
It's a
on
tough
flag. I
question.
And
know,
not,
right?
you can't do a sentence like it's from Moby Dick where it goes for 3 pages.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Well, the potential of MedTech in Philadelphia. Be ready for your 500 fights. It's going to take some fights, but you will get there in the long run. You have the potential if you come to Philadelphia. You really do.
Excellent. Christian?
I want to see great potential because the infrastructure is here. And I think we have phenomenal building blocks. So I would just say the future's bright. I truly believe so.
Yeah. Well, that's terrific. And so thank you to our panelists. I just want to add that from where I sit at the statewide association, Philadelphia, I think, is terribly underrated for what a great MedTech community it has. And I think with Tiffany Wilson joining the Science Center with her MedTech background in forums like this, where we can highlight the scientific and business and entrepreneurial prowess that exists in the Philadelphia MedTech community, we'll get the credit we deserve. So again, thank you all for joining the panel. Thank you to all of our audience members. Angela, I think I came in under the wire, so thank you for helping facilitate and forwarding the chats to me.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank you, everybody.